Ramble wizard! Fudging dice rolls. The act of a DM rolling something on a die and choosing a different result despite what the die says. Now, some people are for fudging dice rolls, and some people are staunchly against it. Me, I think we should let the dice tell the story. Let random chance guide the game, you know? Well, there is one major exception where I think you should fudge dice all the time, but I'll talk about that later in the video. But for the most part, yes, let the die tell the story. If the dice want a character to succeed or fail, live or die, then that's how it goes. But not everyone believes this. In fact, most people are fudgy fans, as it were. They fudge dice most often to save player characters from meeting a violent end. Now, I think this isn't the way to go about this. I think holding back the jaws of death can actually restrict how much fun you can have at your table. But I just couldn't think of how to convince people on why they should try to off their players in battle. So, to help these pro-fudgers understand where I'm coming from, I'm using the YouTube comments. So commenters, why should people not fudge their dice rolls?
If you stop listening to them, that's kind of heresy. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Okay, I don't know if you would face damnation for fudging a dice roll. Not a great start. You know what? Let's go to another comment. Maybe that will be more helpful.
If you're going to fudge rolls, what was the point of rolling in the first place?
Now, this is the most common response you see from the anti-fudgers. If a druid casts Entangle onto a monster, but the DM just decides, yup, they pass a save, that feels kind of bad, right? It's kind of lame if the druid took a spell that just never works, right? Why even take that spell? Why not just take another? Feels bad. But thankfully, that's not why most people fudge their dice rolls. Usually people fudge their dice rolls for the benefit of the player. I don't think many would just choose to succeed on an Entangle, but they would stop the druid from getting crit. And if you're gonna choose for them not to get crit, what was the point of even rolling in the first place? If you don't want that player character to die, why did you attack them? Except, that's a really disingenuous and uncharitable way to see why people fudge dice rolls. You know, again, it's usually for the player's benefit. That's why most people fudge the dice roll. No one is planning on rolling max damage against the druid or critting them. You shouldn't really plan your turn around a 5% chance on the die. It's unreasonable to assume that the DM is tracking a player character's health. They have so much to track, and you want them to keep track of that? No. Not many people do that, and they shouldn't do that. Because I think in the moment when you fudge the dice rolls, it's like, hey, I got a nat 20. The player might just say, oh no, I'm at 8 health. And you're just like, and you kind of panic a little bit. It's a spur of the moment decision rather than a planned out thing. You know what I mean?
I was just checking to see if I hit the PC, not to turn them into goo because I crit 3 times.
Yeah, this person makes a good point. He was just trying to hit a player character, not hit them for double damage. That stuff does happen, but we shouldn't expect that to happen or plan around it. That seems a bit unreasonable. Like at that point, you're planning not for an average amount of damage, but what the max possible damage should be. Like, let's say a fighter has 48 health left, and you want to cast a fireball on them. The fireball's max damage can be 48, so should you plan that the fighter fails and you also roll maximum damage? Because that can happen. It's very unlikely, and you shouldn't plan around that, but that can happen. I think even as a player, taking maximum damage from a fireball is such an interesting story, and we should celebrate those wacky moments. And I think that can make for some great stories. That is a memorable moment you can share with your friends. So saying if you're going to fudge dice rolls, what was the point of rolling in the first place? I think that doesn't really acknowledge the reality and randomness of some situations, and it doesn't acknowledge why people are fudging dice rolls in the first place. Kind of an unhelpful thing to say. Doesn't really get our point across, you know? But all right, you know what? Okay, I will be charitable and say this person is advocating for allowing player character death at a table. If you're just gonna keep people alive, why even attack them? You know, yeah, that makes sense. We should try to convince people that player character death is good for the table. I think it can make for some great stories. I think it can really add to your game. It can be a pivotal moment for the GM to craft a wonderful story for his players. So YouTube comments, how can a GM craft a good story by not fudging dice rolls?
I don't think it's a GM's job to craft any particular story. It's their job to roleplay as the rest of the world.
Okay, I didn't pick these comments super well because that's just wrong. A DM both roleplays the world and crafts the story. Like if you have a homebrew campaign in a homebrew world, you're crafting the story the players go through. Yeah, the players actively can change the story and alter it and are the leading force in it, but you're still building the paths in front of them that they can take or not take. The rest of this comment, I think, makes some pretty interesting points. But, when you open with that, that's a little odd. I think that's a bit weird. I wouldn't have led with that. But you know what? Let's focus in. Let's switch it up. Let's look at some pro-fudging comments and see how we can convince them that maybe there's a better alternative to run their game. But first, ad time. If you like TTRPGs, comics, and wrestling, you might like Phoenix Fan Fusion. Fan Fusion is an event for all things nerdy. They got rows and rows of gaming cabinets you can play all for free. I'm going to be hitting up the NBA Jam cabinet at some point, and speaking of, I will be there. I will be running games of DnD 5e there, so sign up for those before they are gone. RuneSmith will also be doing the same. Speaking of RuneSmith, we are going to be hosting 2 panels there. One where we talk about YouTube and answer your questions, and another where me and RuneSmith metaphorically fight to the death. We will have to defend the hottest takes of our fans. Loser of the debate faces a spicy punishment and then has to keep debating. So get tickets to that to cheer me on and boo RuneSmith. They also have live wrestling. Mario and Wario wrestled last year and the wrestlers were really talented. And if you have kids that are 12 and under, they get in for free. This event does have kid-friendly stuff like Lego build-offs. One kid made a Chili's restaurant last year, so that's pretty cool. Phoenix Fan Fusion is on June 5th through June 7th at the Phoenix Convention Center in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. If you are interested, click on the link in the description of this video. Don't miss Fan Fusion this June, and thank you to Fan Fusion for sponsoring this video.
People always say, let the dice tell the story. The dice doesn't have a clue how to make a good story. Sometimes the dice will allow the players to have an awesome clutch moment in a boss fight. Other times it will decide that the story should be the wizard getting crit twice on turn 1 and dying instantly. I don't see an issue with the occasional fudges so that the DM can maximize the positives of using random rolls while also creating a better story and a better experience for the players if fudging it will do so. If fudging doesn't make the experience dramatically better, then you probably shouldn't do it.
Okay, well that's a very level-headed take. The game is about everyone having fun, and however you do that is good. I don't fully agree with him, but he's making some interesting points. The main reason people fudge dice is because they want to make a good story and want to avoid characters meeting violent ends, because they see that as an end to the story. And that's not true. And let me be clear, I think characters should die in your games because it makes for good tension and cool stories. I'm not coming from a place of malice or spite.
So the players can fudge dice as well? It's for the benefit of the story, of course. In this moment, they just so happen to roll a crit while you didn't watch because this is a very special moment.
That is pretty spiteful. Oh, he's a Fallout fan. That makes sense now. Look, I like Fallout as much as the next guy, but the Fallout fans online, ugh. Like, that subreddit is a cesspool. They defend gatekeeping there. It's awful. So it makes sense for this guy to give really bad advice. Weirdly, I've seen a bunch of anti-fudgers advocate for this, where if a DM fudges dice rolls, the players should also fudge dice rolls. It doesn't really acknowledge the fact that DMs and players have fundamentally different roles in the game, which is really obtuse. Also, if the DM chooses to not crit someone, I think the player will be fine with that. Most players won't be too bent out of shape for it. But if the player chooses to, in this case, crit someone, I think everyone at the table is not gonna like that. A DM choosing to not crit a player is not the same thing as a player choosing to crit a monster. The DM is choosing to play at a lesser capacity for the benefit of the players. The player is choosing to benefit themselves. It's innately selfish behavior. It's very I have no friends coded. Actually, I made this poll a while back that is relevant. If a DM can fudge dice rolls, do you think it's acceptable for a player to fudge their dice rolls? 9% said yes out of 5.5 thousand. So what, like around 450 or something? Woof. That is not great. That's a lot of people acting out of spite. But you know what? I'm going to give the people who voted on this poll the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they are not acting maliciously.
Yes, because if the DM is allowed to cheat, so is everyone else. If I found out my DM was fudging dice rolls, I would lose all respect for them, genuinely, because it is cheating, like even if you're doing it for the benefit of the players. At that point, the DM just decides who wins, and that's not fun. There's no chance, there's no stakes, so what's the point of
Okay, it's just blatantly malicious. It's all spite. Everyone who'd voted yes is just a spiteful weirdo. He made an interesting point about a lack of stakes when you fudge dice, but why would any sane person listen to the guy who sounds like he's trying to speedrun losing friends? It's this eye for an eye makes the world go blind mentality that people are just inflicting upon their friends. Seriously, guys, I'm trying to convince people why fudging dice rolls to save players robs them of a good story. It's not hard. Now we're telling them to get revenge on the DM. It's not that hard. You're making this so much harder and weirder than it needs to be. Just talk to these people like just a normal human. Just a normal human. Can we do that? Okay, I'm gonna make this really easy. Let's find a pro-fudging comment that is super easy to pick apart, okay? Let's do an easy one.
I fucking lie all the time just for whatever feels the best in the moment, honestly. Fights boring, enemies start doing a bit better. Characters struggling, maybe keep some crits as 19. NPC ally in position to do something cool, either they'll nail it dramatically or completely fuck it up. For I am its god and my will capricious.
Okay, great. This is a super easy comment to pick apart. On the surface, this guy has good intentions, but if he fudges as much as he says he does, there might be some underlying issues. We could ask how he balances encounters. Maybe they're too easy, maybe they are too hard. We can give him some recommendations and tools to help him. If characters are struggling a bunch, we could recommend some homebrew for his player characters to use, maybe make them a bit stronger or more balanced. And then if we give him those tools, then maybe he will fudge dice rolls less. There's a lot of ways we can take this. All right, anti-fudgers, this is your time to shine.
Then write a book and stop wasting your players' time. Nobody wants to waste 4 hours watching the DM play with themselves.
Fuck me. I just came in with all spite. What do you mean the DM plays by themselves? That's not even what he said. It was so easy to respond to this. The ball was on the tee. It was all set up for you. You could have crushed it out of the park. And you swung, missed, and shattered your own kneecap. You're not even listening to the things they're saying. You're just shouting out empty platitudes. Who's gonna be convinced by this? Seriously. Well, fudging is done in secret. At least it's not like most people will find out if you're doing it or not.
I've played with DMs who fudged rolls, and everyone at the table could always tell when they are fudging rolls. Fudging rolls just makes you look like a tool. When you're inexperienced, you shouldn't fudge rolls because A, you're learning, let yourself learn, and B, you're not gonna get away with it.
Okay, everyone is Sherlock Holmes apparently. Like, I'm not pro fudging dice, but like, how would you know? How can you tell? Did you cast Circle of Truth on them? Did they get a -2 on their deception checks? Like, it doesn't seem that hard to look down at your dice, see it's a 20, and then just say, does a 5 hit? Like, I'm not a professional poker player, but I feel like I could do that pretty well. This doesn't seem that hard to do, so how in the world is it a guarantee every time? How is it an absolute certainty? How? Oh no, not Mr. Fallout again.
Here's the thing. You only need to get caught once to completely ruin the experience of players at the table. Even if you're a great actor, and you aren't, you will fall sooner or later. It is infinitely better to learn to roll less and being okay with rolling dice in a dice rolling game. If you don't like random chance, choose a game without it.
Now, I thought this comment was very interesting, so I had to ask, how do people find out? Like, actually how? How would people know you're fudging dice rolls?
You stutter for a moment.
Damn, I got an FBI human lie detector in my comments. That's crazy. And everyone knows all DMs are super perfectly well-spoken. They always pick their words carefully. They never stumble on them.
Or a string of suspicious lucky moments happened. Humans are really bad at emulating random chance. Even if you successfully fudge rolls thousands of times, you need to fail exactly once to ruin the whole campaign. Trust is easy to lose and hard to earn back. There's no reason to risk it. Being honest with your table is always better than lie to them.
My God, it's dramatic. I really feel like this person needs to read their own comment out loud to themselves, because I don't think they're even hearing what they're saying. And I think this comment sums up everything that I think is wrong with how people talk online against fudging dice. The anti-fudgers, while I agree with their stance, are so bad at arguing the point. They present these false worlds where everything is either determined with dice or everything is entirely made up, with no nuance or middle ground, where there are only two extremes and you cannot exist anywhere in between them. Understanding and meaningful dialogue are replaced with soapbox hyperbole. In these delusional realms they fabricate, you cannot just rarely fudge dice. You either fudge dice never or during every critical moment. And even if you do it once, it will ruin entire sessions or even campaigns. Relationships will take irreparable harm, friendships and trust will crumble under the massive weight of a lie, even one with good intentions. And if you fudge dice, you're on your way to hell. The anti-fudger commenters do not address the actual reasons on why people fudge their dice rolls. Most people fudge their dice rolls in service to the fun of the players, and many of them are afraid that player characters will kick the bucket. They think a character dying will ruin the game and the story. And I don't think this is a wrong way to play or anything, but I do think they are missing out on a component to the game that makes it incredible. I think they are cowards, but at least they seem calm. They are not advocating for players to cheat in some kind of vengeful way. I can't see anyone listening to the anti-fudgers in this comments and take their advice, but I can see people listening to the pro-fudgers. Say what you want about them, say that they're crybabies, say that they're scaredy cats, but what you can't say is that they don't care about a player's fun. And I guarantee you, if I was in a game with one of these people, if I told them, hey, you don't need to worry about my character dying, I don't mind, send me, dude. I think most of the pro-fudgers would respect my wishes and then crumple my head in, which is great. I can't see anyone listening to the anti-fudgers in these comments and take their advice. Except I did get one comment that's a pretty reasonable anti-fudge take.
I think there are usually other ways to ensure that the PCs don't die, such as making less optimal plays, or opening up negotiations for a truce. If I want something to happen in a certain way, I don't let the dice get involved. So I roll in the open. I think it also fosters more honesty and more sportsmanship with the players.
Yeah, Nathaniel makes a great point. I mean, not about the sportsmanship thing. What are you talking about? We're D&D fans. We don't even know what a sport looks like. But no, he makes a great point. There are ways to get around character death that are narratively satisfying, and I think for the DMs worried they might obliterate a PC, this is good advice for them. However, sometimes accidents happen. Again, most DMs aren't tracking the player's HP and no one is expecting a crit. People were not expecting to destroy a character. So to all the anti-fudgers in the comments, let me show you how you actually encourage people to not fudge dice rolls. Hey pro-fudgers, how you doing today? Listen, I understand you don't want PCs to die, I get that. It's a sad moment. The players put a lot of time and love into these characters, and if they perish, that character's gone. But that doesn't mean their story has to end. That story can continue on through their next character. In Game of Thrones, the character Ned Stark is the central focus of the show for the first season, but he gets beheaded and stays dead for the rest of the show. But that doesn't mean the story ended. It was a pivotal moment in the story. Without that moment, Arya, Ned's daughter, wouldn't grow up to become this cool assassin looking to avenge her father. Without that death, Robb Stark, Ned's son, wouldn't lead a campaign of war against those responsible for his father's beheading. The story was not cut short like Ned Stark, but it grew from that moment. And if you allow death to happen at your table, you have the opportunity to make a beautiful story. And think about that time where you made that character, where they were so excited to play it, they were so excited for this backstory. You can have that same feeling with another character. Every character is special, and you will have those moments again. And if you allow this aspect into your game and engage players way more, like everyone locks in when they think someone is close to getting booted off this mortal coil. Some of the most memorable moments I have in D&D was when someone was either rescued from the jaws of death or was pushed into them. I cherish those memories, dude. And yes, if you do character death, we want it during the big boss fight, obviously. But just because a character died to Gary the generic goblin doesn't mean that death can't have weight. It should have weight. You can use that death to really enforce how dangerous this area is and how big of a threat these goblins are. Or maybe this goblin tribe was kind of a joke of a threat, but not Gary the Goblin. Gary the Goblin was built different. He ripped out the heart of the wizard. So maybe Gary gets away and the main villain finds him. He brings him into his operations and makes Gary even more powerful. Then, later on, the party could be walking along and who do they see riding upon a winged steed, monstrous and terrible? Gary the Goblin. Even stronger than before, and he's back for blood. That is a hype moment. And you know the person whose wizard character died is gonna be like, let me at him, I'm gonna curb stomp that green little bitch. But what if Gary the Goblin didn't get away? What if he was slaughtered shortly after slaying the wizard? Maybe Gary could be raised from the dead by a villain who sees potential in this little goblin. They killed the wizard. That could be very useful for me. Or maybe Gary was just too angry to die and comes back as a revenant to get revenge on the player character who slew him. And for the player whose wizard died, just because they are gone does not mean that wizard's story is over. Ned Stark's story wasn't over. Your story doesn't have to be either. The wizard could have been searching for some crazy artifact to gain more power. Maybe that player's next character can be a fighter who is seeking for that artifact, but he wants to destroy it. Maybe the wizard was on a quest to find his missing daughter. Well, what if that player's next character was that daughter, who was also searching for her father, but she was too late and he got murked by Gary the Goblin. And now her quest is to avenge her father's death and slay Gary the Wizard Slayer Goblin. Character death is not the end of a storybook. It's the end of a chapter. And if you want that story to keep going, you just gotta turn the page. See that? See what I just said right there? A lot more convincing than telling someone you will lose all respect for them and implying you will be sent to eternal damnation, huh? It's almost like if you listen to people, it's easier to talk to them and convince them. Crazy how that works. Now, I know I said I am on team no fudging dice rolls, but there are times where I think you should fudge dice. I know, I lied. But in my defense, a lot of the anti-fudging people don't understand nuance, so that would have fallen on deaf ears anyway. Now, I don't think you should fudge dice rolls in most normal situations. If the dice want a character dead, then so be it. I'm never gonna fudge a dice roll to harm a player. If I want to off someone, I'm gonna do it fair and square. The dice will determine if they live long and prosper or live short and perish. As much as I want to slick my hands with the blood of the player characters, I don't want to fudge dice to do that. I want it to be by the books and indisputable, which is a sentiment pretty much everyone believes, by the way. So when do I fudge dice rolls in the normal games I run? One, if I overtune a monster. Look, I do a lot of homebrew. Sometimes I make a monster a little bit too strong, and it's a little bit unfair, the thing I threw at them, so I kind of scale it back a little bit to make it a bit more reasonable. Is it unfair to fudge dice? Yeah, but I also put them in an unfair situation to begin with, so we're just trying to course correct. Two, if you're just trying to wrap things up for whatever reason, let's say you are 5 minutes away from when the session needs to end, there is one goblin left, and the party is clearly going to win, so you, as the DM, tell the fighter a 13 hits, even though their AC was a 15. That's totally fine, I think. Look, people gotta work in the morning, so let's just wrap this up. That's fine. That's a pretty clean way to end the session. This also applies if a combat is boring. If players are not into something and they seem bored, just say the last hit offed the giant or whatever, and everyone else runs away. You can also just say, and then you guys won the fight, without having to fudge dice rolls. That's also an acceptable way to do it. Neither of these options should emit strong feelings from people. This should not even be a blip on your radar. If you have a strong emotional feeling to either of these situations, please go say your feelings out loud to the person closest to you. I don't care if they play D&D or not. You need to hear yourself what you're saying and how ridiculous it is that you're getting upset over this, of all things. I personally prefer to just fudge dice rolls if we're trying to wrap up a fight. Yeah, you could just say, and then you won, but I feel that feels kind of lame. It feels like you're winning by committee. I would rather be like, yeah, I got him, I did it, gang, and then you just kind of move on. I don't really want to give my players a handout. They don't really want a handout. It doesn't feel as good. Again, these should not elicit strong responses. If they do, you gotta figure yourself out, dude. It's a weird thing to get mad about. And three, if someone is just having a bad day, let me give you an example. I had a player who had to cut off all ties with their family because the relationship just wasn't working out. This is the people who raised them. This was the family they grew up with, and they changed so much and were so detrimental to their emotional state, so detrimental to just their lifestyle. It brought more harm than good to this person. It's one of the hardest things this guy had ever had to do, was to just cut off all ties with the people they grew up with. And then, like a day later, they were in my D&D game, and they were not rolling well. And they tried to cast a spell, and does the spell, did they fail the spell? And of course I rolled like a nat 20, and I'm just like, yeah, man, he failed. Because God forbid I just give him an ounce of happiness, I just want to make his day a little better because, dude, he's just going through it, and I think he could just use a win. all right? It's not a big deal. Him being happy is so much more important to me than the rules of the game. And to anyone saying that I should have had the spell fail because I rolled a nat 20, and that I was lying to my friend and I'm doing him a disservice, implying that you know better how to treat my friend than I know how to treat him. This person I have known for years and see on a weekly basis, and you have never met in your life before. If you think I shouldn't have fudged my dice rolls for my friend in that moment, I would tell you you lack wisdom and there is a hole where your heart used to be. I'm so sick of people giving D&D advice, and it's just this friendless behavior they're promoting. If you have a DM who fudges dice rolls, don't play at that table. Or you could just, talk to the DM and they'd probably be fine with it. You should do this because it's part of the rules, even though it will just trash a relationship. And again, because we are in the age of hand-holding where we have to do clarifying statement followed by a clarifying statement followed by a clarifying statement. I only did it because he had a really fucking bad day and he did one of the hardest things in his life. Again, there's nuance to this. There are gray areas. You need to accept that. At the beginning of the video, I said there was one time where you should fudge dice all of the time. There is one situation, I think, where fudging is not only a good idea, but required to do. And that is when you're DMing for children. I will say, I cannot speak for running a game for my child. I am not a parent. I've only run games for campers at a camp. That is my experience. I'm not gonna speak to how you should raise a kid with D&D. If you're DMing for children, fudging a dice can save you from a 30-minute meltdown. Before anyone jumps in the comments about an opinion about this, I need to make something abundantly clear. If you haven't DM'd for young children before, your opinion doesn't matter. Let the people who have actually gone through this tell you what it's like. Okay? Don't make some weird assumptions on things you've never done before. I imagine the people who are against this are gonna make some argument saying, well, you're teaching kids that they can win all the time. You're teaching kids that there's participation trophies. You're teaching kids bad lessons. What lesson do you think they should be learning? The game of fairness? No. Here's the lessons that kids should be taking away from games of D&D. They should be learning patience. They should be learning politeness. They should be learning sympathy and empathy. They should be learning teamwork. They should be learning creativity. These are all great things you can teach through D&D, all things you can instill into a very young, growing person. Because let me tell you right now, exactly how it will go if you never fudge dice rolls. Let's say you just crit a player, and that kid is, let's just say he's playing a druid, and the druid goes down to 0 HP. So then he has to make death saving throws. That kid is now going to start crying, saying, "I'm dead!" You have told him before that he is not dead. You still have to fail your death saving throws. That doesn't matter. You're explaining this to him. Even after you explain it, he is still crying, saying, "I'm dead!" Just sobbing uncontrollably. And so you have to pull him aside and just start to calm him down. Meanwhile, the other kids at the table are just kind of uncomfortable. God forbid if they start feeling bored. Then you have to deal with two things at once. Now, this is probably gonna take like 15 minutes before this kid calms down. These other kids are gonna be bored. And then when these kids get sent home to their parents, God forbid the kid tells one of their parents about this and they tell it poorly, and the parents like, wait, what the heck is going on at this camp? They call the camp or the school you're working at and said, hey, my kid cried uncontrollably at your D&D game, or hey, why are there kids crying at this after school thing? What the hell? And then you get a call from your supervisor saying, hey, what's going on? Because if the parent made the decision to call wherever you work, they are definitely going to be mad. And now you gotta deal with an angry parent. Are you happy you didn't fudge dice rolls now? Are you happy? Do you feel like you did a good job? Did you do it? Did they learn a lesson? No, they didn't learn a lesson. They learned nothing. They learned nothing, dude. They learned maybe how death saves work. Honestly, I wouldn't even give them that. They probably didn't. They're probably gonna forget that. Just fudge your dice rolls for kids. The things they should be learning are how to be nice to your fellow players. That's the thing they should be learning. And if you fudge dice for your kids, it makes everyone's life better and easier. I promise you that. And again, I can't stress this enough. if you haven't run D&D for children, your opinion doesn't matter. You can have feelings one way or the other, but don't claim you have knowledge of something you've never experienced or practiced before. So, after I've said all of this, hopefully you have some takeaway on how to talk about this subject with other people. Just listen to people, don't use hyperbole, try and understand where they're coming from, and maybe you can help solve an underlying issue. So, to those people who do fudge their dice rolls to save their players from character death, are you convinced? Was I convincing? Were the commenters convincing? Let me know in the comments. I feel like this can be a healthy dialogue, and I really hope it is. Maybe I convinced you, and I really hope I did. And if I didn't, that's okay, because at the end of the day, as long as you and your table are having fun, you are playing D&D correctly. Full stop.